Shetland lace knitting is a beautiful, intricate style of knitting that originates from the Victorian era in the Shetland Isles. The earliest examples we have are from the 1830s, and they're these beautiful, lacy shawls and wraps and handkerchiefs and all sorts of decorative things. They're mainly made by women and made for export. So the people of the Shetland Isles weren't generally wearing their creations. They were exported to the upper classes in England. Now, Queen Victoria was a big proponent of lace and finery, and that kind of really brought about the popularity of Shetland lace during the Victorian period. The two main types of Shetland lace that were created were shawls and stoles. These were both wraparound garments that were mainly decorative in Shetland lace, but also were garments that could be knit in larger gauge with thicker yarn that could be used as more of a utility garment to keep you warm in the winter. Now, the making of Shetland lace shawls and stoles and other objects was a really intensive process. A lot of time, the makers would spin their own yarn to make the very, very thin, almost cobweb-like yarn that would then be knit into these meters-long shawls. Not much is known about the individual knitters and design processes because a lot of these things weren't written down. They were passed down from generation to generation, and a lot of times multiple people worked on the same project. After hours and hours of knitting, they would be bleached and stretched across these huge frames in order to really bloom the designs and patterns. Now, once machine-made yarn really came into play, it was hard for it to achieve the same fineness that a lot of Shetland lace makers were using that they could spin themselves. So as the kind of industrialization of textiles became more prominent, Shetland lace fell more and more out of fashion, and now it is an endangered craft. But now, thanks to the internet and newfound love of knitting and heritage crafts, we can highlight these makers from the past and their objects, and hopefully bring Shetland lace knitting back into the forefront of the textile world. Now, when it comes into getting into Shetland lace knitting, there are a lot of different resources out there, and there's kind of a lot of misinformation as well. I think when it comes to trying to bring these heritage crafts into the present, there's a lot of things we can do to still respect the original creations. So a good research point is looking at books and people who are actually from Shetland and looking at extant examples. So this book, Shetland Fine Lace Knitting by Carol Christensen, was done in conjunction. So this book was done in conjunction with the Shetland Museum, which houses over 400 pieces of lace. And it goes through all the different patterns and charts each of them and does a modern recreation of all of them. And it's a really good source just for trying to get inspiration into how these things were really constructed and made. Now, it doesn't give you patterns for full objects, but it gives you patterns for specific motifs, which can then be used in a multitude of projects. So there's kind of a line, a very fuzzy line of where something becomes historically inspired versus recreation. Like, can I call this Shetland lace, or is it inspired by Shetland lace? Now, I'm no expert, so I don't have all the answers to these things. So when I was looking to do a Shetland lace pattern, I wanted to look towards a Shetland lace knitter. So I found Elizabeth Williamson online, and I chose her pattern, My Shetland Home, because it seemed like a really good beginner pattern and has a lot of those classic Shetland lace motifs. And now, having knit all the motifs in that pattern, I can say it's a really good beginner's intro to all the different kinds of techniques you're going to need for Shetland lace. I haven't done the join between the two halves yet, so I can't speak to that, the instructions on that. But each of the individual patterns is really well mapped out. It's charted and it's written out row by row. So no matter what kind of knitter you are, you can follow this pattern. And what's even cooler is when I'm looking through this book, while a lot of patterns aren't specifically one-for-one with the My Shetland Home that I found in this book specifically, I can see a lot of the similar motifs and themes of like the different diamonds and the waves. And it's just really cool to think how hundreds of years ago, somebody was knitting the same stitches that I've just knit in the past 2 weeks. And I think that's the really awesome thing about doing historical craft, is you get to almost be as close as you can possibly be to the past because you're doing the same actions with sometimes the same materials. Now, I was using modern materials with, metal interchangeable needles and, modern yarn, machine spun yarn. So it wasn't as authentic as I could have possibly gotten to the Victorian Shetland lace. I could have spun my own yarn and done all these things. Now I don't necessarily have the skills to do that, but that would have been the traditional way of doing it. But I think doing the My Shetland Home pattern has really given me a newfound appreciation and love for lace knitting, and I'm really excited to maybe do a larger Shetland lace knit project in the future, either from Elizabeth Williamson. She's got a lot of great patterns on her website. I'll link down below, or something that incorporates different patterns from this book here, because there's just so many gorgeous things. I mean, even just the cover work with these beautiful edges, it's just so inspiring to see these things that have been around and part of this like luxury fashion world for so long. To be able to recreate that in my own home with my own two hands is really cool. Before we get into my actual process of knitting this that I filmed, I did have a wonderful opportunity to sit down with Elizabeth Williamson, who designed the pattern and is a Shetland lace knitter of many years, and really talk about the craft and what goes into being a modern knitter trying to restore this heritage craft to its former glory. So let's get started. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. So I just want to start, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us who you are and a little bit about what you do.
So I'm Elizabeth Williamson and I come from Shetland. I was born and brought up there, and I left Shetland when I was about 30. But I've been knitting since about the age of 3 when my mother taught me how to knit. And then we had a knitting teacher at school. So as part of our schooling, we had a teacher that came in and taught us how to knit. And I don't know when, but we think it's about the age of 10. I started knitting lace, and I've been knitting it ever since. So that's quite a few years that I've been doing it now. And so what I do is I design and knit Shetland lace patterns, and also I teach online classes and also in-person classes as well.
Yeah, wonderful. So, I mean, obviously, knitting has been, a part of your life ever since before you can remember. Do you remember like what thoughts you had on it as a child? Like, was it just a given that you were going to end up doing this? Or, like, were there any phases of your life where you did more or less or tried other, things? Or was it just always knitting all the time and that was just a given?
Well, I think when you were growing up, it everybody around you, they were all knitting to earn money. And so I sold my first lace scarves. I must have been about 11-ish, so I was still at primary school. My mother was selling her, she's a lace knitter, and she was selling her lace knitting. So I then was knitting scarves as well to sell to the local knitwear factory. Um, so as a child, everybody around you's doing it, and I enjoyed knitting. Um, but I have to say, when I became in my 20s, through work and other things, I didn't knit as much. I was still knitting, but not as much. And then after having my children, I got back into lace knitting more so again, but I've never stopped knitting.
Yeah. So it was further into adulthood when you decided to kind of make this like a career, um, for yourself then.
Well, it was Shetland Wool Week that changed, because during COVID they held a virtual Shetland Wool Week, and they contacted me and asked if I would do some online lace classes. And initially I said no, because how can you teach lace knitting online? I was a bit skeptical. But I then other people in Shetland who already did online classes, and I spoke to them and they encouraged me and said, no, no, give it a go, it'll be, and then they helped me and with setting up and everything else for doing it online. And it was a big success. All my classes sold out. I put on more classes, they all sold out. And then once the Wool Week was finished, I had lots of people contacting me saying, oh, we really enjoyed that. That was great. What next? And I'm going, well, I wasn't planning to do anything next. And it just really snowballed from there, then doing my own patterns, publishing my own patterns, and doing the classes. So if Shetland Wool Week hadn't been virtual, I wouldn't have gotten into it at all.
Yeah, so just kind of like happenstance that happened. So when you started teaching, what kind of led you to pattern design? Like there's obviously, a lot of patterns already out there. What brought you to specifically wanting to design patterns yourself for Shetland lace?
Well, I'd been doing it all the way along, since because that's what nobody in Shetland would say that they design are designers. They just knit. So like my mother just picks up her needles and then she casts on and she knits something. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. More often than not, if you're my mother, it works really well. And so you're always knitting, and you look at something and you go, "Oh, that's a nice idea," and you get inspiration from things, or you go, "Well, I want this. I want something um, to match something else," or and then you just sit down and you start knitting. And so I'd always been knitting other people's patterns, but also knitting my own ones. But I wasn't actually ever selling the patterns. I would sell the items that I knitted, or I would give them away as gifts. And it was just the encouragement from other people saying, "Oh, you should publish some of these," that made me actually put pen to paper rather than on scrap bits of paper. Having a little
Yeah.
bit of instructions here and there, and actually putting them together. So I had something that I was always doing, but not in a uniform, sensible, structured manner.
Yeah. Well, and obviously knitting patterns, I mean, there's a lot of discourse about knitting patterns and tech editing and all these things these days. So obviously, since these aren't, like garment things, the Shetland lace are mostly open garments. So I'm guessing a lot of that's not an issue, with like grading patterns and stuff. You don't need to worry about that. So in a way, it seems like it might have been quite easy just to make a chart and then be able to publish it, kind of right away.
Yeah, this when you're knitting a scarf, it's not quite the same as knitting a jumper that needs. When you specify it's 1.5 meters long, then people know what size it is, and is that going to fit around the neck twice, or is that not big enough, or is that going to be too long? Whereas you're making obviously a jumper, you need to have all the different sizes.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting, so when I was doing research on Shetland Lace, and I mean, it is classed as an endangered craft. But you mentioned that like everybody was doing when you're growing up. Is that like in your family, or was that like you mentioned having school things? So how ubiquitous was it in your kind of community growing up for people to know? Like, was it just the women, like grandmothers doing it, or was it just everybody?
So when I grew up, we were taught at school, girls and boys were taught how to knit. Um, and so you started off just with plain knitting, and then you would go, and then the next thing we would knit is a fair isle, something fair isle. And then if you showed an aptitude for it or you wanted to learn, then you moved on to lace later on. So everybody was taught. Doesn't mean everybody liked doing it. And certainly I know lots of people I was at school with, that was the last time they ever did any knitting. But
Yeah.
the generation kind of before us, women were having to knit to earn extra income. So a lot of people, that was a source of income, so they had to knit. Not that they wanted to knit, because most people now, we knit for enjoyment because we enjoy doing it. We like new patterns, and but then it was a source of income that people required for their households. So like my mother, when she was younger, she hated knitting, but it was something that had to be done. So yes, now I think lots of people only knit because they want to, but certainly in the past it was essential. So certainly when I was growing up, my granny was knitting. Fair Isle was the thing at that time that was in demand. So my granny would be knitting, my great aunt, her sister would be knitting, my mother would be knitting. So whenever you went to people's houses, everybody would be knitting. They come to you, they would even take their knitting with them.
Yeah. So it's really a community base. And how aware of you, like how aware were you about the history of Shetland Lace while you were doing it as a child? Is this something you grew up, like you were told about the history of it, or was it just you were just doing the act of it?
I think because it's nowadays a lot of people are interested in the history, but when we were younger, and certainly when I was younger, you didn't ask. You were just told what to do when you did it. And I regret now because obviously I could have been asking lots and lots of questions. Now I have so many questions about the history of where did this come from and why did you do it like this? Or who taught you that? And that questions we don't have answers for because everybody is doing it. It's just seen as a skill that everybody's got. So there's not a case of wanting to delve. And certainly as a child in knitting, as a teenager, you're not asking that kind of questions. You're just
Just
doing
going
it.
on with it, yeah.
And I think a lot of things, so you're learning by osmosis because people around you are talking about it. If you speak to my husband, he's very knowledgeable about knitting because he hears me talking about it all the time. And that's you're just picking things up from people all the way along, but you didn't necessarily say, but why do you do that or who taught you that? So it's just you're learning as you and picking up things as you went.
Yeah, definitely. So do you find so now as an adult being in this heritage craft space, how do you feel having this like having a career in heritage crafts rather than something perhaps more stable, that's like, a 9 to 5 corporate job rather, kind of that dichotomy between those two worlds and the kind of uncertainty of the future of, crafting and things like that.
Well, I just see myself as very fortunate that I can do this. I've got the support and backing that I can continue doing this, designing, knitting, and writing about it. Because a lot of people you don't have that ability to do that, and they do need to go and work 9 to 5 in an office. Whereas I do have the luxury of being able to focus my interest and love of knitting on this craft.
Did you have a different career beforehand, or have you just always been like crafting and family oriented?
Well, I used to work in as a medical secretary in a local hospital, and then I always say I was a logistics manager. That really means that I had 3 children, and we moved a lot around the world, from Australia to Papua New Guinea, back to Scotland, back to Australia. So we, as a family, when our children was young, we moved around a lot.
Yeah.
So I would say that I was a logistics manager,
Yeah.
trying.
Well, it's hard moving as we both know at this time. So, yeah, no, definitely. So how long have you been like full-time kind of like a knitting creator now? How many years has it been?
So I started, I think that was 2021 when Shetland,
2020, so about 4 years.
yeah, the last 3, 4 years I've been doing it.
And what's been your kind of favorite part of making this your career? Like, has there been any moments that have just been, kind of like a turning point or a high point for you?
I love meeting everybody. And it's really, I find that really just seeing how in people, especially when people come to like, and I do talks and things, and they're not really interested. They've heard about it, but they're not interested, and then they come to a talk, and I tell them all about the history of it and introduce, and then I get all the messages going, I'm now hooked on this. It's really interesting. I love knitting it, and so that's really good. Just enthuse people about it's my history, it's my heritage, my culture, and having people that to have a little of had of the like it's a different type of knitting, different lace, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Wow, this is so much fun! I'm really enjoying it." So just that's always good. It always makes you feel good. It you that people are interested in what you do.
Yeah, definitely. Do you find that most of your students are people who are already, kind of not advanced, but like intermediate to advanced knitters, or are they mostly beginner knitters that are going into like, this as kind of their first foray?
Oh, it's vastly different. Some people, I've had people come to classes that really can just do about a knit stitch, and others who have been knitting for 60 years. So I can have in one classroom a huge range of people at very different stages in the knitting. So there's never just a certain like st everybody doesn't have the same starting point.
Yeah, how does that make it more difficult as a teacher? How do you kind of balance that between advanced knitters and beginner knitters, with teaching something like this?
I always start every class by going through the basics of each stitch and how to do them because that's the wonderful thing about knitting. It has evolved in different places throughout time and in different ways. So everybody might have a slightly different way of doing everything, but I think, well, when you come to my class, this is the basics, this is how I do it. So how to do a two together, and and how to do three togethers and how to do yarn overs. And I just take everybody through those steps at the very beginning. And for people who've never done it, then it's really interesting. And it's not so interesting for people who do know it. But it's just worth always covering the basics. And then once you've got that knowledge, then you can do anything. So it's just covering it and going over that to begin with. And then I always look at charts and written instructions, and then you can move on. And in that way, you can make sure that everybody's on the same page before I start. Because the yarn over is a prime example. It's I think it's a terrible. It's called a yarn over, but that's not what you do with the yarn.
Yeah.
So we were taught is yarn forward because that's what you do. You bring the yarn to the front of your knitting, then you do the next stitch or action, and that creates a yarn over.
Mm.
So it's even something like that where I know a lot of people actually put the yarn over the needle and then do the next action. But that means the stitch is orientated and
Yeah, it's gonna be twisted.
it's going to be twisted. So it's even something as simple as that because it's a term. And unless you've got somebody showing you how to do it, like I did as a child, then you won't know that. When you see it written down as a yarn over in a key or a pattern, you're going to then think, well, that means you take the yarn over the needle. So it's even something as simple as that, that a lot of people go, well, that's obvious, but it's not obvious.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part of being a teacher. It's, showing somebody something and you're like, why it's so obvious to you? And yet I think it's a really great skill to have as teacher to be able to really like not dumb it down, but bring it down to that kind of basic level. Um,
It's breaking it all down to then to build it up. It's giving that framework like I was given as a child because we were verbally taught how to knit and how to do these patterns. You were verbally taught how to do it. So it's t taking it back to that point that then if they pick up any pattern, they're able to do it. You don't assume
yeah.
anybody's knowledge or what people know. It's just it's always good to and that's I found is quite helpful in classes for people. And then it doesn't make people also feel bad that they don't know.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then people don't like to ask because then they might feel that, well, I don't want to ask that because that's an obvious question. So you want people to get the most out of your classes and enjoy it. So that I hopefully then in doing that, then everybody's is in the same position.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, kind of switching towards resources for people who are interested in Shetland Lace. Do you have any recommendations for books or, YouTube videos or any online resources for people who are looking to get into Shetland Lace for the techniques and also for the history?
There is a lack of really good online that I found. The Shetland Wool Week has a great YouTube page that's got lots of things on there. A great source, it's not on YouTube, you do have to buy it. It's called 50 Tips from Shetland Knitters, or maybe, and that's by Elizabeth Johnson and Hazel Tyndall. That's a great, and that's not just lace, that's Fair Isle as well. Um, Hazel's also got another one about Fair Isle knitting. Um, and you've got the books. You have A Legacy of Lace, which was published and written by the Shetland knitters, spinners, weavers, dyers. That might be in the wrong order.
Yeah.
Um, but they published a book called The Legacy of Lace, and another wonderful book is one by Dr. Carol Christensen. And it's just was out last year or at the beginning of this year. It goes past very quickly. And it is a I'm going to, because again, I'll get the title wrong. It's Shetland Fine Lace Knitting, Recreating Patterns from the Past.
Yes, I own that one. I bought that one a little bit ago. That's been very interesting to read. Just look at
Yeah.
all those old historical patterns and the recreations that people do. It. What I find so fascinating is the fineness of the thread because they were spinning their own yarn that just cannot be replicated with machines today. Um, and it just the difference of the visuals, depending on what yarn you use, you could be doing the exact same stitches and it looks completely different, which I
Yeah.
just think is very cool.
Yeah, my mother spins, and she spins fine. So, and it's the problem I find is the terminology of one ply, two ply, lace weight, cobweb, because there's not a standardized system. But my mother's fine spinning is a two ply, but her two ply spinning is still thinner than the cobweb yarn you can buy from the shop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's two ply.
Yeah.
That's
Ply means nothing. It's like how big are the plies then,
Yeah,
that
exactly. But
go
that's
into
two
it.
threads put together, and that two threads together is still thinner than a bought cobweb. That's how thin
Yeah.
that she spins.
Do you have any favorite materials that you like to use for your Shetland lace? Obviously, if you're not having things that are, hand spun, any commercial materials or yarns that you would recommend for people looking to get in Shetland lace that's kind of more available to people?
Yeah, there's the two main suppliers in Shetland is, and it's confusing, they're both Jimison. There's Jimisons of Shetland, and then there is Jimison and Smith, the wool brokers. So they have a really good supply of lace weight yarns in different colours, and they also have the finer yarns as well. So they've also got the Supreme range, which is the heritage range as well, at the wool brokers. So there's quite a selection of wool from them. And then you've got all the local suppliers as well in Shetland that are doing their own yarns as well. So there's quite a few. So if you look up Shetland yarn suppliers, then you'll get quite a good selection, especially on heavier weight yarns. But for cobweb and lace weight, the Jimisons of Shetland, and Jimison and Smith are really good for lace knitting.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, so animal fibers is the way to go, I assume, with Shetland lace. Like, is there anybody who is making it out of other materials, or are we mostly sticking to wool?
No, because in the past we've got examples in the museum. People used what they could get a hold of. Obviously, main thing would have been wool because we had lots of, or still do have lots of sheep. But you also had men went to sea. They would come back and they would bring back with them various things. There's cotton, there's silk in it as well. My great aunts, they bred Angora rabbits and they spun into their wool because it made it softer. They would comb the rabbits and then spin into their yarn with their Shetland wool. They would also spin in the Angora fibers.
So yeah,
So
it was just whatever people had.
yeah. And people still will spin. Spinning is less common in Shetland now than it was. But yeah, so you can get, so my mother still spins, but she will spin camel, alpaca, anything that she can get a hold of, she will spin as well as wool.
Yeah, I'm using alpaca. It's an alpaca and silk blend for the My Shetland home scarf, and the blocking of alpaca is really, really good. So that's turned out really well. So I was excited about that. But I'm definitely going to look into getting some of that nice thin Shetland wool to kind of branch out further. Because now that I've done a little bit of Shetland lace, I'm like I've kind of found a love of lace knitting within the past few months, and I'm like, this is all I wanted to now. Um, so I'm really excited to hopefully make a full hat or shawl or something in the future.
but as long as it has memory. That is
Yeah.
what you're looking for. It has to have memory because obviously it needs to be, we call it dressed or blocking. So it's when you stretch it out,
Mhm.
then to keep its shape and size, you have to dress it. So you need a fiber that will stay. So that's why cotton isn't as good to use. It's
Yeah.
practical, but it's not as good because it doesn't hold its shape as well.
Yeah, I saw in your Instagram a couple days ago, you using the wire across the edge for the plugging, and I was like, I was having issues like with the kind of like wobbling on the sides. I was like, oh, I need to do that. So I'll definitely link your Instagram at the bottom of this video so people can check it out because that was a really good tip that I didn't think of. So I'll definitely be doing that in the future. So to kind of round this off, I was just wondering, do you have a favorite lace motif or stitch or pattern that you have?
I would have said no, but then it's always interesting when other people look at my work and comment, and then I do like a tree, the tree motif, and then when I looked back and I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
I include it in most things. I was going, no, I don't think so, and then you go, and then somebody goes, you do include lots of trees, and I was going, yes, actually, when I look back at things I've done, so yeah, I would have to say I do like a tree because they can come in lots of different sizes. They can be uh, going that direction, the other direction, on the sides. They're very versatile, but yes, I do like a tree.
A tree, perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and share all of your knowledge about Shetland lace.
Thank you for having me.
So I cast on my Shetland home scarf last night, got a few rows in, started the lace chart, and had to frog it all, and now start over. So this is a problem. No, problem's the wrong word. So this is the difficulty with knitting lace, especially in a wool like this, where it kind of likes to stick to itself, is that when you mess up, it's kind of hard to go back. So I am no expert in knitting lace. I've done a couple things in it, but nothing too much. So this is a little bit new territory for me. Also, I've never worked with this yarn before. And it is very soft and likes to stick to itself a lot because it's a little bit fuzzy. It's a little bit fuzzy, so it likes to stick to itself. So I had to undo it and restart. So that's how we're going so far on the My Shetland home. I'm working on chart A, which I think is going to be very cool. So I'm just working my way up this. So I'm only about 2 rows in because I had to restart. But I'm very excited to see where it goes. And hopefully the second time goes better than the first. Quick update on the My Shetland home scarf. I finished chart A and B. You can actually really tell kind of the pattern. Now, obviously, lace is going to block out a lot, so it's going to stretch, and all of these are kind of, really bloom when we do that. I did come across a factory knot in the yarn, which is unfortunate, but luckily it was at the end of the row, so I was able to just alternate my stitches with the different sides of it. Now, since this is such a silky yarn, knotting it wouldn't really work. I did think about spit splicing it, but I'm not sure how that's going to react with the silk because this is a part silk, and silk doesn't spit splice. So I've just decided I alternated it for a couple stitches, and I'm going to just weave in the ends. Now, luckily, as a scarf, it's not going to get a lot of like pulling and tension probably on the stitches, so I'm not that concerned about just weaving in the ends and then just leaving it. But yeah, I did enjoy chart A more than chart B. Chart B had these 2 yarn overs next to each other, which created these kind of like larger holes, kind of almost honeycomb alternating holes in there, and they were a little bit fiddly, but we got through it. So I'm very excited for chart C because that's a kind of motif I'm very familiar with. There's a couple other projects I've done with, it's kind of like a diamond flower type thing. I will update when I get on with that, but yeah, here we are. I'm very excited about how it's turning out. This yarn is so soft. I'm really hoping I have enough left over to make myself something because it is really nice. But I'll definitely be looking to purchasing some more from UK alpaca in the future because it's just it's so lovely and so soft. But yeah, it is going very well, and I'm hoping to be halfway done because it's basically the 5 charts, and then you do the first 4 charts again, and then you graft them together. So I'm hoping to be done with in about a week, hopefully, with the first like half of the scarf. That way I've done all the motifs and I can really see how, the basics of Shetland lace once I've done all of those. But yeah, this is how it's going. So, hit a bit of a snafu last night. I thought about filming it, but it was about 11 o'clock and I was about to lose my mind. So I decided not to. But I nearly finished chart C for my Shetland home scarf. And then I noticed that all of my alignment for the little flower motif on the last row were just one stitch off. Don't know how that happened. Usually what I do is when I finish the pattern repeat row, I will go and look and read that in and kind of be like, okay, those, the yarn over is in the right place. But I didn't do that. So then I got nearly to the end, doing a few rows of just garter stitch and noticed it was completely off. So I was like, oh, I could leave it. I could tink back, but it was like 6 rows. And I'm like, oh, tinking back that and frogging. I was kind of afraid of frogging this yarn because it's very sticky. It sticks to itself because of the alpaca fibers. And also with the yarn overs, I'm like, I don't know if I'll be able to catch all the stitches in the right place. So I was like, oh, and then out of nowhere, a bunch of stitches on the motif lower than that dropped and created a big hole. I don't know if where I dropped a stitch or something. So point is, I had to unravel like an entire day's worth of work on this. So not the end of the world. It'll take me probably, 2 hours, maybe to not even 2 hours. I'm just slow. If I really hunker down, it should take me maybe an hour to get through all of those rows again and just make sure I'm really paying attention this time, not dropping any stitches and everything's aligned. But yeah, that was my evening at 11 o'clock, just slowly unraveling and then taking a darning needle and some waste yarn and picking up every stitch. Yeah, that was my little snafu. So hopefully we can get back on track and finish this very quickly. I am concerned a little bit about the length because I'm about halfway through the third motif here, and it's only this long. Now, obviously, we will gain a decent amount of length in blocking because it's lace and that's what, it's meant to grow. But it's supposed to be scarf, and there's only, so when I finish it, that will be about the A, B, C, D, E, so 5 charts. That will be about half the length that it's going to be in the end, because then you just repeat them all again and then Kitchener them together. So I am going to block it when I get to that halfway point before I Kitchener them together. I'm going to do like a mid-project block because I really want to see if I need to do more repeats on the second half when I cast on. So only time will tell. But yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the length, or maybe it'll just be a short scarf. I don't know. Alright, so I finished fixing my mistake. It probably took of active knitting time about an hour, and I started chart D, which is a little bit different than all the rest. I've only done the first 2 pattern rows, so we can start to see it's going to be little diamonds going up, kind of triangle-ish. Now I'm interested to see how it works up because we have these centered decreases in the middle. Just slightly fatter stitches, so it'll be really interesting to see if those are actually noticeable in the end of the motif, or are they just kind of there to resolve the yarn overs. So I'm excited to see how this turns out. But yeah, fix the mistake. Everything looks good now. All of my little flowers are nice and even and centered, and no dropped stitches, hopefully, and we can keep going. But yeah, so trucking along. Still a little concerned about the length, but we're just going to keep going. And one of the things with scarf is I have enough yarn. I just keep knitting repeats of the pattern until it is long enough if I decide that that's needed. So yeah, we're trucking along. Oh, it looks so good with the light in the background. That looks so nice. It's hard to see when you're just like staring at it so much, but when on camera, like through that background light, you can really see each of the patterns, and I'm really excited to see how it's turning out. So I was a bit of a dummy, and I kept mentioning how I was concerned about the length that the scarf was going to be, but I just printed out chart E because I forgot to print it originally, and it says repeat rows 23 through 30 35 times. So I'm no longer concerned about the length. This is why we read our patterns all the way through before we start them, which I think I did do originally, but then just completely forgot about it, and since I forgot to print the page, I just assumed it was the one more motif and then it was done. That's another 32 rows. But no, it's going to be quite a few more than that. So I started chart E last night, but I gotta say it's not my favorite out of the bunch, and that's the one I have to do the most. So I'm gonna try and get as much done as I possibly can today. There will be no no real breaks except to do hand stretches and eat some food. I'm going to try and get as much done today as I possibly can because I'm running out of time to finish this for this video. So I'm hopefully going to get through those 35 rows and then do a block. Um, and then kind of have that be where I'm going to end here, and then I'll finish the other side of it before I need to give it to my friend. So we're going to truck along. I've got my matcha, I've got my YouTube, and we're going to see how much we can get done today. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to knit until I run out of this ball of yarn here, which doesn't look like a lot, but I think it is actually going to be a decent amount since it's such a lacy open weave. But I've got about only 4 out of the 35 repeats. Oh, that looks so good against the sun there. Yeah, 4 out of 35 repeats that I need to do. So I'm just going to knit until this ball is done, and then I'm going to do a mid-project block, and then kind of call that the end for this kind of like experiment in Shetland Lace. Of course, I am going to finish the scarf, but that will wait for a while for the sake of this video. I think I'm just going to knit till that ball yarn's done, and then we'll go through the blocking process. So I'll come back when I finish that, and we can block it, which is, I think, going to be the most exciting part because it's really going to bloom. Oh, so excited to see how this turns out. Okay, finished the ball of yarn, which means we've come to the point where for this particular video, I'm going to be stopping. Obviously, I'm going to finish it, so if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'll have that link down below and you can see the finished product. Hoping to finish it by Thanksgiving this year in November when I go back to America to give this to my friends, so that'll be the goal. But I'm going to do a mid-project block to really see how these lace patterns give their really full effect, because you don't really get it when they're scrunched up like this. But I think it's going to look great. Now, traditionally, a lot of shawls in Shetland knitting were bleached and then stretched on these huge frames to really stretch them multiple times their size in order to get the full effect of the lace patterns. Now, obviously, this is a scarf and not that big yet, so we don't have to have a huge frame, nor do I own one, but we can do the regular blocking method that a lot of modern knitters use, which is pin out the piece with some pins on a foam mat, which I do have the supplies for regular knitting, so I will be doing that. So I am going to soak this in a slightly warm bath of water with a little bit of wool wash, just to, get it nice and pliant for pinning out, and then I'm going to pin and stretch it. So come back to you when I have done that. All right, as you can see, I have this soaking in just a little bit of warm water and wool wash. I do have my stitches on this burr cord just to make sure that it doesn't slip off, but I'm going to leave this for about 10 minutes, and then we will very gently wring it out and block it. All right, so I've taken out the knitting, and now I'm going to squeeze it out very gently. Like, it's already growing so much, I can tell. So I'm just going to wrap it in a towel and wring out some of that water. Doing this on the floor because I don't really have a good surface to do this in the house. But, all right. Like, gosh, it has definitely grown. It's already longer than it was. So I'm probably going to need a couple panels. So what I have is these panels that I'm going to put together. Okay, so I've got 3 panels. I'm going to lay out the scarf, and it's a little going to be a little wider, I think, than each of these panels, so I might have to do another layer. All right, so I've got the mats done, and I'm basically just going to pin all of this out as much as I can, and I'll come back when that's done. Okay, I've got it all pinned out now. Now, it's a little bit You can see scalpy at the edges. I'm not sure how that'll block out. I wanted to really stretch to see, you can see my mistake there, um, the patterns really well. So I'm happy with how this is looking, but we'll see how those edges come out. Now you can get these pins that are like in rows that I think would be better for this, but I don't have any of those. So I'm just working with what I got here, which is always historically accurate. Just make do with what you have. Now, normally I would put this outside, but it's actually quite cold and windy out today, even though it is August. So I'm just going to leave it inside, and hopefully it will be dry in a day or so, and I will be able to take it off the blocking mat. So I will come back when I've done that. So we did actually end up getting some sun. So I've put this outside, and in just like an hour, it's already like almost dry. I took the pins out of this side. Oh, and I'm just obsessed with how the drape is looking and how even all the stitches are looking. So this will definitely be dry by tonight. I'm really glad the sun came out. And it actually is gonna be dry. Yay! So you can see kind of on the side where I pinned it, it's kind of goes scalp. Now on the bottom edge, that's what it's supposed to do. So that looks really good. Um, and just by nature of having these kind of pins, it's kind of become scalped on the edge, which is not like terrible. Like it's not, especially as a scarf when it's worn around the neck. I think it'll be fine. But I think when I do the second block, once I've attached the like done the rest of it and attached the second piece, I'll have to block it again to stretch the rest of it. I'll get some of those kind of straight pins to kind of hopefully get that out. But it looks so freaking good. Absolutely gorgeous in the drape. Like you can just tell that it's really lightweight and nice, but it's alpaca, so it's still going to be warm in the winter, even though it is such like a flowy fabric. But it really does accentuate, like you can see my mistakes right here, but the rest of it, all the stitches are blocked out very, very nicely, and you can really see like the flower patterns and the wave patterns kind of just come to life. It's such a cool transformation. All right, so coming back, I've taken our half scarf off the blocking mats, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I am thrilled with how this is turning out. Obviously, we have quite a ways to go with the pattern here, and then we got to do all these repeats and then graft it together. But I think this is a really good just introduction and beginning of Shetland lace, and I feel like I've kind of fallen in love with the craft. I am now looking at all the patterns on Elizabeth Williamson's website and thinking, I should make a stole, I should make shawls, like I should make everything, like that old tradition of having like a trousseau, which is like a woman would make all these linens and things for like, I would guess be for her wedding, her married life. But for myself, I'm like, I just want to have all of these pretty linens and doilies and all of these, tablecloths and things and shawls. And I just want to make everything in these beautiful lace patterns. So I think I'm definitely going to be knitting more lace in the future and hopefully inspired by historical patterns. But I am just absolutely thrilled with how this came out. And I can't wait to keep knitting on it. And delving into the historical side of it, I just think it's so cool how I'm knitting the exact same stitches that people for hundreds of years have been knitting. Now, Shetland lace, it's not the oldest craft, but it has such a rich history of especially women's crafting and the crafting that people did in the past for the upper classes that they didn't necessarily get to enjoy themselves. But now, especially with the Shetland Museum and different projects like Carol Christensen's book, we get to take these old techniques that weren't necessarily being used by the makers and kind of reclaim it into the makers' hands. So to conclude my delve into Shetland lace knitting, I have again kind of fallen in love with it. I love the just techniques of doing the yarn overs and knit two togethers, and it's just somehow simpler yet more complicated than modern knitting. It doesn't include a lot of different stitch types. So, and honestly, I think it kind of is beginner friendly just because you don't have to have all of these different techniques combining different types of decreases and increases and shaping and fit. It's just very simple geometric shapes, but it creates something that looks so unbelievably complicated and gorgeous that everybody, anybody would be impressed seeing it and think that you are like a knitting genius. So I think if you have any interest in historical crafting and you're a knitter, definitely give Shetland lace a try because it's just such a valuable craft that we can preserve and keep this really rich history alive for longer. And it creates some absolutely beautiful pieces that I'm really excited to wear and give away and just have in my collection just to feel like history is still alive inside my house. And even though I'm not from the Shetland Isles, I still feel a connection with makers and with women of the past, and doing this project and doing all this research has really just solidified the connection with hundreds of years and generations of crafters, which I think is really special and amazing.